Welcome back. All right, so I want to take another look at the race in the West because this is the race we have. We don't have a race in the East. Everybody's already made it. It's just a matter of who's going to play who. Now, your number three team currently in the Pacific is LA. You've got two teams tied for a wild card spot with Nashville and Dallas. I think Nashville's in good shape. Nashville, I think, is the safest of the five on the board. Then you've got Vegas and Vancouver below the line. So I went with Nashville because I'm like, they should be the safest. I'll look at them first. So they're 43, 28, and 5. Same record as Dallas, but they have 41 regulation wins to only 29 for Dallas. So while Dallas has this reputation for being really exciting and winning games in overtime, which is great, the problem is your first tiebreaker's regulation wins. Now, their five most recent games, they had an overtime loss, 3-2 at Pittsburgh. They had a 1-0 win over San Jose at home. At home, they lost 4-0 against Edmonton, which is the big one for Nashville, and that's what kind of puts them in peril, right? But then they win 4-3 against Chicago at home before they lose again at home 8-3 against St. Louis. So the two losses in their last three against St. Louis and Edmonton are worrying, the combined score being 12-3, but they're still in pretty good shape. Today they're at home against Calgary. That could be a problem, but on Saturday they go to Tampa. Might be a bit of a problem there too. And I'm saying but because I still think there's enough games left where they make those points up and they get it done. Then they come home, they play against Minnesota on Sunday. They play against Calgary on Tuesday. That is at home. Then on Thursday, they're at Colorado. Friday, they're at Arizona. So the difficult part for Nashville is this. Those are some pretty tough teams. But Colorado, again, they've got the West sewn up. Probably going to be resting some players. By that second meeting with Calgary, they should have the division sewn up. Number 2 seed overall. And so they should be able to navigate that. I think Nashville is pretty secure in a playoff spot, right? If they win out, they get 103 points. They're not going to. But again, 103 points because they have 6 games left. They're at 91. They could end up at 103, and they won't. But if they end up at, say, 97, that would probably be enough to hold off the Canucks, who can only reach 98. It'll be interesting to see if it holds off Dallas. So I want to talk about Dallas next only because Nashville and Dallas have the same record. So over the last 5 games, Dallas has played pretty well. Last night kind of cratered for them. We'll see. And again, I do think being tired and exhaustion is starting to show up. I was reading an article today on scoring being up in the NHL. And one point that they talked about was the compressed schedule and players being tired. I have noticed way more in games over the last week, players passing to no one because they need to get off the ice, they're tired. Not very crisp movements coming out of the zone, those zone exits being a problem, which means turnovers, and turnovers very often end up in the back of your net. Now for Dallas, over the last 5 games, they went to Chicago, they won 6-4. Then they came home, they won 1-0 against Tampa. At home against Minnesota, they lost a spirited affair, 3-2 in overtime. Then they won at home against San Jose. So that's 3-0-1 in the 4 games. In the 5th game, of course, last night they lose 6-2 in Vancouver. So that's troubling only from a perspective that it puts Vancouver within 5 points of both Dallas and Nashville. Now on Wednesday, they're in Edmonton. So they've got to get their act together because tomorrow they're in Edmonton. That's not going to be easy. On Thursday, they're in Calgary. So it's back-to-back nights against Alberta teams. Then on Saturday, they're at home against against Seattle before they play at home against Vegas on Tuesday, which is a huge game for both Dallas and the Vegas Golden Knights. Wednesday, they're at Arizona. Friday, they're at home against Anaheim. Their path to the playoffs is a little bit easier than Nashville's, but again, with Dallas, we'll see, right? We'll see whether or not they're able to keep things up. I optimistic that that Dallas makes the playoffs. I swear I'm awake. I'm optimistic Dallas makes the playoffs, but I didn't want to wear Dallas in this video because I still think Nashville is probably the most secure of the 5 on the board. Now, LA is an interesting case because LA is the one that people seem to focus on, and they say, all right, for Vegas or Vancouver, the easiest way for them to get in might be catching LA. Now, Nashville and Dallas both at 91 points. LA's at 90. LA's played 77 games. Dallas and Nashville have played 76. So it's true that they've played one less game than LA. LA has one less points. So those numbers would tell you LA's in some trouble. Their 5 most recent games, they lost at home 3-2 against Edmonton. Then they lost 6-3 at Minnesota. They won 5-2 at Chicago. They lost 9-3 at Colorado, and then they won 2-1 against Columbus. The remaining schedule looks relatively easy. But today they're at Anaheim. I mentioned in the preview, I'll say it again here. Anaheim doesn't like LA. LA doesn't like Anaheim. When it's two California teams against each other, even when they're not in a playoff spot, they're nowhere near a playoff spot, the games are usually pretty darn entertaining. They can often be close as well, and the hate ramps up pretty quickly. On Thursday, they're at home against Chicago. Then on Saturday, they're at home against Anaheim. It's not out of the realm of possibility that LA wins all 3 of those games. But again, Anaheim, if they want to play spoiler, this is where they could do it. And if they could peg off one of those games, you're giving hope to Vegas or Vancouver, depending on what they do between now and then. Then on Wednesday, the following Wednesday, they go to Seattle. And then they finish their season that following night in Vancouver. So a trip to the Pacific Northwest rounds out their season. And for LA, it's possible that Thursday game against Vancouver won't mean a lot, but it might mean the difference between making the playoffs or not, right? So their 90 points, their 31 regulation wins mean that for Vancouver, if Vancouver ties them, it's possible Vancouver ends up with the tiebreaker, and I've seen that. People saying, well, Vancouver would have the tiebreaker if they're tied with one another. The regulation wins, it's fine, but if they end up with the same record, and if the regulation wins are tied, then we'd have to go to the next tiebreaker from that. I'm not worried about that right now. I'm not overly concerned because we're not at that point. But 100 points is the most that LA can get this year. I don't think they win out. Although, again, these are 5 games that are winnable for LA. And they seem to be getting a bit healthier up front. Their blue line, there's still holes on that blue line, absolutely. But they're getting healthier up front. And if they can win 2, let's just say they win 2 out of those 5. They get to 94 points. For Vancouver, they have the possibility of getting to 98. So there's still the possibility there. And for Vegas could, if they win out, get to 97. So again, if LA were to struggle and goes 2-3 in these games, yep, and yes, Vancouver has that control with that one game against them. But again, it's dependent on LA playing down to their opposition and having some struggles. The Vegas Golden Knights, 41-31-5. They do have 33 regulation wins, which means they have the tiebreaker on both Vancouver and LA right now. So if there's a tie in points, Vegas has the upper hand. Over their last 5 games, they won 6-1 versus Arizona. Then they lost in overtime, 5-4 at Vancouver. If that had been a regulation loss, I'm just going to say I think that would have likely been it. Now they win 6-1 at Calgary, but then they lost 4-0 at Edmonton. And that was a road trip where they needed, I would say, 5 out of 6 points, and instead they get 3. Then last night they lost 3-2 against the New Jersey Devils. That is a very troubling result because, again, we always look at the schedule and you say, okay, well, that's a soft matchup, so they'll win that one. But that's why they play the games. To quote Don Taylor, that's why they play the games. Now, tomorrow, Vegas is at home against Washington. Washington showed in Colorado last night pretty darn good on the road, right? So Vegas has to be careful. Vegas's fortress has not been quite the fortress it used to be either. While their record has been better lately, overall this season, their record at home has not been the stellar record we are used to them having. Then on Sunday, so from Wednesday to Sunday, they have no control over everything. They've got Thursday, Friday, Saturday off, which is good for practice. It's good for guys healing up. But then they're at home against San Jose. On Tuesday, so the following Tuesday, they're at Dallas. That's a huge game for both teams. The next night they go to Chicago, and then Friday they're at St. Louis. So the St. Louis Blues could play a role in deciding whether or not Vegas makes the playoffs. And again, St. Louis right now is back and forth with Minnesota. That could be a very important game for St. Louis. So with 87 points in 77 games, 97 points is the most they can get to. And so they're 7 points away from being technically, potentially eliminated by LA. And the way this works is if LA wins their next game today in Anaheim, and then if Vegas loses at Washington or versus Washington in regulation, then they're only 3 points away from being eliminated. So it can change very, very quickly. Then you get to Vancouver, and the excitement in Vancouver is real. I was a part of it last night. The cheering for every goal was almost as loud as the cheering for Luke Shen beating up Jamie Benn. And so, yeah, over their last 5 games, they've won all 5. They won at Arizona 5-1. They won versus San Jose 4-2. They won versus Vegas 5-4, and that was a perilous game in that third period. Then they win at home 7-1 against Arizona, and then they win 6-2 last night against Dallas. Their goal differential is now equal with Vegas at a plus 17. I'm not worried about the goal differential though, because at this point, it really doesn't tell you who's going to finish above the playoff line. It just tells you that LA's had its struggles, right? And so is Dallas. Dallas is a -6 with goal differential. But today, Vancouver's at home against Ottawa. I have some concern because it does feel like it's a trap game. It does. Ottawa's coming off of a loss last night in Seattle. Vancouver's won 6 in a row. They're going for 7, right? So if they survive that, they win that game tonight, then they go on the road. And this is not an easy trip. It's a short trip, but it's a tough one. Thursday, they're at Minnesota. Minnesota battling St. Louis for that second spot and getting home ice advantage, which, as I mentioned in the preview, is really exciting until you get into the playoffs and then it doesn't matter. And then Saturday, they're in Calgary. Now, if you're a Flames fan watching this, you know Calgary would love to eliminate Vancouver from playoff contention. And I really think that with the way Vancouver's playing, I don't know that they would be a preferred opponent out of any of these 5 teams for a team in the playoffs. I mean, if you're looking at Vegas, Vegas is potentially, I keep seeing this. So all year I've heard about how Vegas, well, they're contenders, and now that they're below the line and they've been struggling, now it's, hey, if they get in, they could do damage. I'm not saying they can't, but I would be more scared of Vancouver right now than Vegas if it came down to a best of 7 series. Because Vancouver has Demko, they have confidence, they're playing with a lot of swagger. Vegas, I don't know how much faith they have in Leonard, and I don't know that the confidence or the swagger are there for them either. So Vancouver's upcoming run, that road trip's going to be interesting. Then they come home, they play San Jose on the Tuesday, and then they play on Thursday against LA, and then they finish the season on Friday at Edmonton. So the Calgary and Edmonton games are interesting because those are not going to be easy. They're both on the road. Vancouver loses both, that'll put them down to 94 points would be the most they can get to. If that was the case, all LA would need to do is go 2-2-1 over the other 4 games. Or their 5 games, all they have to do is go 2-2-1. And so for Vancouver, while that game against LA is huge, absolutely, can we get them closer, LA is still in a position where if they go 500 the rest of the way from here, I don't think there's a path for Vancouver. And again, if they went to 94 points, if they got to 94 instead of 98, so that would be winning 4 out of their final 6. That likely doesn't give them enough to catch Nashville or Dallas. So really, the 6-game winning streak's been great, but Vancouver has to keep going. And at some point, there's going to be a down game. There's going to be a rough game for them because it happens. Again, coming back to the exhaustion point of view, we're seeing teams like Dallas last night that just nothing's working on certain nights. Vancouver can't have that. So there's no room for error. They're playing like a team that knows there's no room for error. And so we'll see whether or not they can keep it up. Now, technically, the Jets are still in the conversation because technically they haven't been eliminated. They could be eliminated as soon as tonight. They're playing against the New York Rangers, so it's possible. They have 81 points in 76 games, so they're 5 points back of Vancouver. And if they win out, 93 points. So they would need to win out. They need Dallas and Nashville to lose every single game because remember, they're in the Central. LA falling doesn't really help them if Nashville and Dallas stay ahead of LA. So really what we're seeing is 3 teams here probably fighting for one spot, while these 2 should be able to lock down those wildcard spots. But again, things can change quickly. And so I know there are a lot of Canuck fans that are excited and believe that they can get this done. And I'm not trying to rain on any parade. It's just it's going to be difficult from here. There's not going to be a night that they can just relax, take the foot off the gas, and rest anybody. They're going to have to just keep going, pedal to the metal the whole way through. And I've seen people say, well, if they win out, Yeah, I mean, if they win 12 games in a row, but the odds of them winning 12 games in a row don't feel great. And again, I want to be wrong, absolutely, 100%. But we'll see how things turn out, right? Vancouver just being in this position, I've talked about this before. The fact they're at 86 points, the fact that this team is in this conversation and on this board, considering where it was at the start of December, is nothing short of miraculous. And so Bruce Boudreau's shown how well he can turn a team around. And of course, there's going to be the people questioning, well, Boudreau's had these other opportunities and it's always sort of petered out. Sure, but he is still pretty excellent at getting teams to play well, at least out of the gate. And yeah, so we'll see whether or not that means playoffs for Vancouver. But either way, there's some real genuine excitement in the local market, which it's needed it. There hasn't been this level of excitement I can remember in Vancouver for a long time. And I know they made the playoffs in 2020, but that year it didn't feel the same as this. This feels different. Towards the end of that season, as we got to the pause, Vancouver was trending down, and it looked like over an 82 game schedule that we didn't get to, Vancouver could have dropped out. This feels different. This is a team that's surging, that's got it all going. And so if they finish just short, this is a team that people are going to pick to make the playoffs next year. Absolutely. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video as we sit about 10 days out from knowing who is playing who in the playoffs. And again, I'm aware that the Jets have a game with Seattle on May 1st, but I don't think that game is going to be deciding a playoff spot so much. And I think that's why that Jets game was so easy to move to the 1st of May, because the NHL would understand that the Jets were unlikely to make the playoffs, right? It's like when the Vancouver-Calgary games were scheduled when they were. It was because, yeah, they're not going to make it anyways. It feels the same. But let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. It's been a very fun season. It does feel like a long season. I've seen those posts too about, hey, 82 games. And that was mentioned in the article I read today too on scoring being up, that an 82 game schedule, players haven't had to do this for 3 years. So it feels different. And, probably exhausting at points, and it's hard to keep yourself mentally in it every single game. But now, at this time of year, they have to be. Or they might find themselves outside the playoffs. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.